Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, so let's talk about WWE and let's talk about the ratings for NXT. Now, there's been a lot of talk about NXT recently. Obviously, we've talked about the changes, the sweeping changes, the changing in philosophy, in vision for the black and gold brand. Of course, the extensive releases, the turmoil backstage, the tension running high at the Performance Center. And what we're going to talk about starting off today is the ratings for NXT, because of course there was a lot of intrigue and interest in how well NXT would do from a viewership point of view this week. Not only, of course, because the last 2 weeks they've been preempted because of the Olympics in Tokyo. So they were taped for 2 weeks. They aired on Sci-Fi as well instead of airing live on the USA Network on Tuesday night. So there was a lot of interest as to, with NXT returning to this live format on USA Network, would the ratings improve? And they did. The ratings improved significantly this past week because Tuesday's live edition of NXT on the USA Network drew 751,000 live viewers, according to Nielsen via Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics. This is up nearly 50%. I mean, it's actually up 44.42% from last week's taped NXT episode on Sci-Fi, which drew 520,000 live viewers, and that was the lowest viewership in the show's history since moving to cable television, since moving to a 2-hour format. Now, Tuesday's NXT drew a 0.19 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic. Now, this itself is up 90%. I mean, just the difference between airing live and being on USA Network as opposed to Sci-Fi is so dramatic, isn't it? It really is so dramatic. So the 0.19 rating in the key 18 to 49 demo is up 90% from last week's 0.10 rating in the key demographic. Now, again, I think it says a lot. I think it speaks volumes because NXT, their viewers primarily have always been in that 50-plus range. It was the same when they were on Wednesday nights. It's the same now. It's a strange kind of figure that for a company that's PG and does cater to, arguably, they try to cater to all demographics, but certainly they try cater to the kids, that they have such an old audience for NXT. It's always fascinating because realistically, when NXT went up against AEW on Wednesday nights, that's where they always got killed, wasn't it? It was in that key demographic every single time. The younger audience, and I know people go, well, demos don't matter, but they do. They matter to television networks. They matter to advertising executives. That key demographic just isn't there. Nevertheless, that overall viewership they'll be very happy with. Now, this week's NXT show marked the return to the live time slot on the USA Network. As I mentioned, NXT had aired on Sci-Fi for the past 2 weeks, taped ahead of time due to coverage of the Olympics. NXT this week drew the most viewers since the May 4th episode. The episode was tied with several other episodes for the second best key demographic rating since May, just behind the May 20th episode. This week's viewership, as I mentioned, was up 44.42% from last week, while the key demographic was up 90% from last week's too. This week's NXT viewership was actually up 6% from the episode that aired 1 year ago, which of course is a positive for the brand. And the key demographic was up 5.6% from the show that aired 1 year ago. Of course, that episode this time last year went head-to-head with AEW Dynamite in the Wednesday night time slot. So I mentioned this a couple of times talking about NXT recently and talking about the being pre-taped and being on Sci-Fi for the past couple of weeks due to the Olympics, that this whole change in philosophy, this whole change in vision, this whole change of we're going with a different mindset when it comes to NXT. We're going with younger guys. We're going with bigger guys that we can mold and sculpt in our own image, that can become the next Roman Reigns of the future, etc. And these releases that have come because of that. If you're Triple H and you're those in NXT, you'll be arguing, yes, of course, we didn't do very well in comparison to AEW, and maybe there are fundamental issues in the presentation of NXT, and maybe it has lost its identity and its image since moving to a 2-hour format, since moving to the USA Network in 2019. But in reality, in comparison to especially what they were doing on Wednesday nights, the numbers aren't totally bad on Tuesdays. Realistically, they're not horrifically bad. I mean, again, this week drew 751,000 live viewers. If you ignore the past 2 weeks, it's been 705, 709. So realistically, if you take out these pre-taped episodes, they've been in the 700s, which they certainly weren't doing since they first moved back, or since they moved to Tuesday nights after WrestleMania, after NXT TakeOver Stand and Deliver earlier this year. So I think they'll be relatively happy. I think they'll be happy with those numbers. I think they'll be significantly happy that with the return to USA and with the return to being live. The numbers have gone up as they head into NXT TakeOver 36 on SummerSlam weekend, but it's kind of difficult to talk a lot about NXT, the product, right now. It's difficult to talk about the storylines. It's difficult to talk about matches. It's difficult to talk about creative with the Black and Gold brand because it kind of just feels irrelevant. It doesn't feel important at this point. You know, when you're having this turmoil going on backstage, when you're having this turmoil of people getting released left, right, and center, of Triple H, isn't he in control, Vince McMahon's vision for NXT, it not being a third brand, it positively being developmental now, and all of this kind of stuff, it's difficult to get invested like even you used to a few weeks ago. I mean, it's difficult to get invested anyway for a long time, NXT, but certainly at this point, because how can you get invested in characters that just might not be there next week? How can you get excited for the future of characters when they might be fired and they might be on AEW Dynamite in about 30 days? You can't. It's not just the uncertainty of the wrestlers and the staff that work there because they're walking on eggshells because they know they might be fired tomorrow in the latest round of budget cuts. As a fan watching it, you're watching this going, look, the guy who was the North American champion 3 months ago is no longer with the company and he did nothing wrong. So why should I get invested in, a Hit Row or something like that? Because the time might come where in a couple of weeks, oh, sorry, more budget cuts, they're gone. And it is difficult to get invested in that. And I think that's a major problem with everything that's going on right now with NXT too. Now, speaking of Triple H as well, there has been some discussions as to what's Triple H is saying all of this. He can't be happy, right? He can't be happy with seeing people he's helped grow and create and develop get released. He can't be happy to have 13 of his roster just vanish overnight because they were fired in the latest round of budget cuts. He can't be happy that people like Pete Dunne and Adam Cole, their contracts are expiring. He can't be happy that his NXT champion's getting called up to Monday Night Raw, an NXT champion that's been undefeated for over a year on the NXT brand. They've protected, they've smashed over, they've beat every single heel and babyface on that roster to make Karrion Kross feel like a big deal. He can't be happy that on his Raw debut he loses in about a minute. He can't be happy that he loses once again to Keith Lee, all that kind of stuff. He can't be happy, right? Now, Triple H has been the brain behind NXT for, 9 years, 10 years, ever since it was really redeveloped and rebranded from a game show to a developmental system in the first place at Full Sail University. Now, he was responsible for giving NXT this unique identity in NXT and turning it into a third brand. But PW Insider is reporting that Triple H is still in charge of NXT, even though there are many decisions taken recently in regards to NXT without him being involved. This is what PW Insider noted, that Triple H was still in charge of NXT on Tuesday nights. PW Insider also noted that Pat Buck has taken on Drake Wuertz's old job of booking local and independent wrestlers for WWE shows, and Molly Holly is still working as a main roster producer on a trial basis. We'll talk about Molly Holly later on. Now, of course, it was reported that Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard were primarily responsible for the recent NXT releases, whereas Triple H and Shawn Michaels, the people who are actually responsible for the creative, the booking, putting together these NXT shows, had no role to play in the recent releases. Essentially, they're playing with someone else's deck. That's kind of the situation right now. Now, Vince McMahon reportedly wants to make NXT a developmental show once again and will focus on bigger and younger talent moving forward. Now, this is interesting because reportedly, according to Fightful Select, WWE made a decision to not sign Wheeler Yuta, who of course has been appearing on AEW television recently. He was on Dynamite last night, and that shocked a lot of talent backstage, as it shows that the company has changed its approach to hiring new talent. This is according to Fightful Select, that said, quote, WWE's decision to not sign Wheeler Yuta, who's currently working in AEW, shocked several NXT talents and was seen as a clear sign that the company's hiring practices were changing. So that is certainly significant as well. Now, speaking of NXT, I name dropped him earlier, and that's Bronson Reed, of course, the former NXT North American champion. I say former NXT North American champion. He was North American champion, last month? And he's already gone from the company, and he certainly stirred things up and made some headlines this past week once NXT was on the air on the USA Network, because he posted a tweet that was certainly maybe seen by some as a shot at NXT or WWE. I'll let you know what you think of it. Now, Reed tweeted out a clip from The Simpsons where Elvis said, quote, "Ugh, this show ain't no good," and fired a gun at his television. Now, several fans responded with negative feedback to Bronson Reed, taking the tweet as a knock at his former employer. Now, the tweet came as Odyssey Jones defeated Trey Baxter in a semi-finals match in the 2021 NXT Breakout Tournament, which led fans taunting Reed with comments on who the better big man of NXT is now. One fan responded to the tweet and pointed out how Reed was knocking WWE whilst he still has the company name in his Twitter handle. Reed responded with, "It's been changed, waiting for approval." Reed later made a tweet that seemed to be a response to some of the negative feedback he was receiving. He said, quote, "I love blocking accounts that are clearly bots. Sad thing is, it's probably people I know." So certainly Bronson Reed is not holding back in terms of his criticism. I know some you were saying, oh, maybe it's not a knock. Is it seemingly a knock against WWE? Of course it was. Of course it was a knock at WWE. He tweeted out something that said, "This show ain't no good," whilst NXT was on the air. Of course it was a shot at NXT, and of course he feels aggrieved. If it was me, would I do that? Probably not. I think you have to... There's a way to handle these kind of things. There's a way to be professional. Does the situation suck? Of course it does. He lost his job and he was a champion only a couple of months ago, and he was doing main roster dark matches even a shorter time period ago than that as well. So of course he feels aggrieved, and of course he thinks, he said it in that video when he posted it. He said, I feel like I'm one of, if not the best big man in the business right now, and I'll prove them wrong. But I think that's how you do it. You prove them wrong. You don't tweet out, "This show sucks." We know the show sucks. A lot of WWE shows suck at the moment. You don't need to tell everyone that. And I think nowadays fans on social media, they don't want to see that. Every time WWE has a shot at AEW, or a recently released WWE star has a shot at WWE, or AEW has a shot at WWE, it makes headlines. We talk about it here on the channel and people talk about it on social media, but overall the general response is, who cares realistically, right? And I think that's the point, that make your headlines by, doing something worthwhile. Make your headlines by wrestling a great match or making an impact in whatever promotion you go to next. You don't need to bash the company that released you. If you want to do an interview, that's fine. I do understand that these talents can't win, because if they go on Talk Is Jericho and they say, "Look, I had no problem with the company, didn't expect to be released, is what it is," that doesn't make headlines, that doesn't put your name out there. And sometimes even people criticize that by going, "I can't believe you're being so nice to the company that fired you." So you can never win. I do sympathize with him there, but there was no need. But he also posted a tweet out last night during Dynamite 2, which we'll talk about in today's AEW news video. So I think he's just saying things to get a bit of attention and to keep his name out there whilst he waits out his 30-day non-compete clause. Let's switch gears here and talk about Baron Corbin. Baron Corbin, to me, is becoming very, very quickly one of the most entertaining characters on WWE television right now. Arguably the most entertaining character on WWE TV. Now, Baron Corbin continues to be down on his luck as WWE has storyline fined him $500 for failing to meet the company's dress code. Corbin, there was a video posted basically on the WWE Twitter account yesterday, and it said, "Welcome to another day in my life. After hitchhiking to work, I simply tried to go in and be on time and was sent away by a security guard that I've known for years." Now, once Corbin made it into the backstage area, he was given a fine for wearing his mustard-stained shirt. He said, "I finally got into the building and, oh look, I'm fined $500 that I don't have for failing the dress code." Now, this is just, it is really tremendous. It is really tremendous, this story. I wasn't sold, and I'm still not completely sold, because WWE, remember, they trademarked Happy Corbin. And it does feel like still this is where it's leading. It kind of reminds me of when Shorty G, that whole debacle of what an awful name that was. And everyone knew that wasn't going to work as soon as it was announced. But before Shorty G was even announced on television, WWE filed a trademark for Shorty G, and everyone went, "Oh no, Shorty G." They were making short jokes about Chad Gable at the time, and everyone went, "We know where this is headed." And it's the same with this. Everyone knows where this is headed. It's headed to a point of Happy Corbin. I don't know what Happy Corbin is. I kind of end up thinking that it might be a case of like sort of the positive DDP character that he did. And I really don't know if Baron Corbin can pull that off. I love this. I do. I think this character is great. I think it's hilarious. I think it's such a departure from what Baron Corbin's done in the past. And it's kind of it's turning him, I think, slowly into a babyface, because not because the fans sympathize with him, just because the fans love the gimmick and the fans love the character. It's funny, it's entertaining. And I know a lot of people have a philosophy on funny doesn't draw money, and that's kind of a hot topic of debate sometimes, of funny doesn't draw money. I disagree. I think it does. As a main event gimmick, maybe not, but it can get you there, and then eventually you do have to be serious. It's like a Kurt Angle kind of principle in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I am interested to see where it goes. I'm morbidly curious about where the Happy Corbin stuff eventually ends up. I really don't know, to be honest with you, where that ends up, but I'll be honest, I never, ever thought, especially in 2019, 2020, and early 2021, that I would be saying that Baron Corbin is one of the most entertaining characters on WWE television today. So you criticize WWE when the criticism is deserved, and you have to give them praise where praise is deserved. And Baron Corbin, the creative team, the writing team, whoever comes up with this storyline, and Baron Corbin for pulling it off, a difficult gimmick so far to pull it off, it's incredibly entertaining. I think it's working. So you have to give credit. You have to give credit for him for pulling it off, again, as opposed to where it's leading, because they can't do this forever, obviously. Where's the payoff? The payoff is going to be in this, whatever this Happy Corbin gimmick is. That's the payoff. But I'm fascinated to see where it ends up. I can't lie there. I am fascinated to see where it ends up, and credit to Baron Corbin for pulling it off. Finally, we touched on Molly Holly briefly earlier. There's some updates about guest coaches at the Performance Center, Molly Holly status, etc. So, former WWE Tag Team Champion Rob Conway, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, I believe as well, is currently back at the WWE Performance Center this week. What a week to be back there, right? He's there as a guest coach, but he must be there as a guest coach training all of these talents, and suddenly he goes in one day and it's, half my class has disappeared. Where did they go? Oh, right, they were fired as well. But Rob Conway is back as a guest coach at the Performance Center. Now, Conway previously worked as a guest trainer at the Performance Center in September of 2018. That stint reportedly was arranged by Conway's good friend Randy Orton. Now, Conway was last signed to a WWE contract back in May 2007. I believe his last appearance on WWE television was during the Kane May 19th storyline. It was a match... was it the May 19th storyline? It was one of his last appearances. It was something like that, and then Vince McMahon fired him on television, and his contract expired, blah, blah, blah. That was the situation there. I recall that vividly. When it comes to Molly Holly, WWE Hall of Famer Molly Holly has been working as a Raw producer at the recent set of television tapings, according to PW Insider. WWE had Holly mostly working SmackDown tapings during this tryout period with the company, but now she's been working Monday Night Raw events as of late. She started working tryouts for a producer role back in June, as the company wanted to hire more women for that role. She noted in a late June interview that she was still in the trial period, but that may have changed as of right now. Veteran pro wrestler Daivari has received a lot of praise for his work as a producer since returning full-time with the company. He went back to the company back in June, I believe. However, this is what's crazy. This is the crazy story about Daivari. So, he previously worked as a WWE producer hired in January of 2019, but he was released in 2020, along with a load of other people, of course, in those budget cuts associated with the pandemic. That was in April. After that, he returned to Impact Wrestling and MLW and some select indie dates. Wrestling once again, but now he's back full-time with the WWE in the behind-the-scenes role. Ironically, he was back for about a week or so, and then his brother, Ariya Daivari, was released from his WWE contract due to those said budget cuts on June 25. As I mentioned earlier, and a related note too, Pat Buck has taken on additional duties in the WWE Talent Relations Department as of late. Buck has also been producing Raw and SmackDown shows, is now working in booking of extras and indie talents who were brought in for those tapings. This was a position that was previously held by Drake Wirtz, who of course was released from his role as a referee back in mid-May, and justifiably so, by the way. So there's a lot going on, and a lot... moving around in that producer department in WWE. The issue is, when it comes to producers, in my opinion, is that they come and go so fast. I mean, just WWE in general. I spoke about it with the beginning of the video with Bronson Reed, and it's a good way, I think, to wrap this up here, is that nobody's safe right now. And that environment to work in, we've heard about talents and producers and agents and whatever you want to call them, walking on eggshells so many times. And it's the same. It's the same with any role right now. In fact, it's even worse because you could be fired tomorrow because you fall under that dreaded budget cut block. And it's terrible to see. But look, guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these WWE news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, gut the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.